Hello and welcome back to BRIMS documentation. This time we're going to take a look at the really ugly portion of the code, which is the overall idea of storage. So this is using a semantic UI element called an accordion, just so you guys get an idea of, and it's important to understand what's happening in an accordion to understand why this gets a little complicated / complex and why the code looks like it does. Also, I invite you, if you're a CSS expert and feel like there's a better way to display this information and code it out, I invite you to do so. This is what I opted for just because I find it somewhat visually appealing and pretty straightforward. So actually, before we talk about the accordion, let's talk about the actual object structure at the bottom here of a storage model and conceptually what's happening here. So you have, in some instances, so you have some place that you're storing a box. That might be in a refrigerator, that might be in a car, that might be in a room. And different organizations are going to want to track that in different ways and at different levels. So some organizations might have multiple laboratories that they're tracking information at, and some they might want to even know inside individual buildings that have rooms that are even maybe sectioned, so on and so forth. Anyway, each one of those objects is a meta object if you think about it. A building can contain something, and a building can be contained in a city or on a campus or wherever. So rather than coming up with all of those different types of things and all of their properties, we just have one generalized concept of a thing called a storage model. You got a name, you got a description, and then really all we're tracking is do you contain something, or are you just contained by yourself? So the foreign key denotes what, and so essentially the parent object doesn't know what's contained within it. However, the child objects have references to the parent object, multiple. So you can have multiple children inside a parent. A parent knows nothing about the children, just to keep it nice and simple and hopefully clean. So in this instance, you have a container. If you have a self-referential container, that means you're a top-level object. That means you're at the very top. You are not contained by anything. You're limitless. But and also, if, and this is kind of another concept, we also have to worry about what's happening when we're deleting things. So let's say you have a refrigerator in a room, but that's getting removed, and you're just moving all of the boxes that were in that refrigerator someplace else. What happens to all those boxes? Well, it's problematic because they're not just ceasing to exist. And my guess is you don't want to throw them away. You want to move them to some other location. So temporarily what happens is we set this receiver for pre-delete, which basically says, okay, if you're deleting an object, all the boxes and all of the storage things that are interior to that are being moved up one level to whatever the parent is. The one danger of that is if you have a lot of things that are contained into a single parent, then you're going to end up with everything dumped up being a top level object. But that's, I think, better than getting rid of them altogether. And that's why on delete we have a do nothing, because down below we have this receiver that's saying, okay, before you delete it, go ahead and change what is basically move it to the parent. So a visual example of that, even though I don't have the delete button in place yet, is if we have a dungeon in a room, if we delete the room, all of this stuff here will be moved into the dungeon, which, apologies for this name. I asked a friend, I'm like, hey, just add an object to test the storage, and dungeon is what was decided. One bit of thing, if you want to help me out, is I need to add a self or some concept. I'm not sure how to word it. To say, where is it stored? Well, it's just stored or it's just a top level object. I don't know how to word that precisely, but I need to add that thing, which is why I haven't added it yet. And unfortunately, if you add it, if you select it once, you can't unselect, at which point it's going into something. This is functional, that mutation, and I think it does work with the refetch queries as well properly. Anyway, now let's talk about, now that you have that piece of information and how that's all working, let's talk about the accordion. And this is where it can get, so if that wasn't complicated enough, here's a little bit of diciness with the accordion object. So first of all, you have an accordion, which is one of these things here where it's dropping down. So this is an accordion as well. Inside an accordion, you can have panels. So this would be one panel, this is another panel. And also you can have content. So like welcome to level 2 would be content. So inside level 2, we've got welcome to level 2, which is represented here, which is the content, but it also contains an accordion that has 2 panels, which these are the level 2 panels here. So just so you're clear on what everything's been called, this is the panel. This entire thing here is an accordion, and this is content. So content is represented by boxes in our instance, and accordions can be, and panels, unfortunately, can be other storage objects, other accordions, so on and so forth. And unfortunately, when we're constructing everything, we need to be a little bit careful about how we logically construct it so that everything ends up in its proper place, which is where the messy code build accordion comes from. I've tried to document this as best as possible, but ultimately it's complicated, and I had trouble figuring out a more elegant way to do it that's less complex. If you have ideas, feel free to take a stab at it. At the moment, again, I'm going to use my classic excuse of that it's functional, it works, but it's a little bit scary. So essentially what's happening here is we're going through, I guess I could do this recursively, but I feel like that would make it even more complicated. But essentially what we're doing is first we're getting all the boxes and we're figuring out where the boxes should be, and we're pushing them into an array, which is our content array. So that's going to be, so now we know where all of the content should be, theoretically. Then we're creating our root panels. So that is the top level panels, which if things weren't complicated enough, keep in mind, this is a root panel, which is different from an accordion underneath. So there's the root accordion, and then there's all of the sub accordions that happen. You need to have your root accordion defined as well. So we've got the root accordion, and we're filling in all of the content, but we're not filling in real content yet as far as the panels. We're filling in kind of dummy JSON data that says, okay, this is what we're eventually going to expect here, that we're then going to go back and fill with real content and real accordions based on what we traverse and figure out down the line. And the best way I thought to do that was just to do a bunch of maps and pushes. So we build the root accordion, we build the actual accordions and put them into an array, and then we go through everything and say, okay, everything go into your proper place as we map through all of the content objects and all of the accordion objects, and everything goes into its JSON referenced proper location is what's happening here. So hopefully you followed that. So initially what we're doing, we build our root, we get all our content into a content array, and then we make a dummy JSON that has some keys that are going to then be filled in with actual stuff as we're doing this right here. And then we fill the root panel with actual accordions, and then we return the entire thing. Hopefully that, and if you don't follow, I understand because it's a little bit complex, but I would suggest just looking at the code, going from there, and just try to puzzle through it. It is very complicated, or a little bit more complicated and complex than I would like it to be, ultimately. But it ends up working. We do get a nice, although I think with the panels, they end up a little bit distanced like this, but I'm okay with that. It's a sacrifice I'm willing to make for this sort of thing. But anyway, we end up with something where we have nested content and panels, and it all works. I do want to make a secondary view where you can actually just search for a box and it pulls up the actual box views. Also, I need to work on the box metadata a little bit because it looks like it conforms. So this looks nice. This, I'm not sure why it's doing this as far as this little rounded button instead of having the nice kind of oval button that I was looking for initially. That's a different module entirely. Anyway, that's the stored section. Again, not the one I would start. If you're looking to contribute, it's not the portion I would start with. I'm not sure that I'm going to go back to that code, mostly because I can't think of a better way to do it. Maybe I'll gain some inspiration down the line. This took me a while to write, but if you guys are enlightened and you want a challenge, feel free to make that a little bit more clear, a little bit more concise along those lines. And if you get something that looks nice out the other side, or if you want to adjust the CSS object to have a custom object, I'd be more than happy to absorb any work that you are willing to put forth in that regard. So that is storage. Next, I think we are going to take a look at the draw schedule, which is pretty straightforward. Not a lot of it is written out. Most of it's being dumped in from the admin panel, but we'll cover it anyway. Thanks for watching.